For the past century, the secular world has largely accepted a religious argument justifying Israel's occupation of Palestine. Yet that religious argument that God gave Palestine to the Jews is a half-truth. The whole truth is that God repeatedly warns in the Old Testament that if the Jews do not obey him, practicing justice and righteousness, he will expel them from their promised land. They cannot come back until they obey.
Ignoring God's terms of no obedience, no return, both Zionists and evangelical Christians have rammed a cruel and unbiblical return to Palestine down the throats of the Arab world. The result? Perpetual strife rending the Mideast, international terrorism plaguing the whole world. Despite the clearest scriptural ban against Jewish reoccupation of Palestine, both Israel and its evangelical supporters remain more determined than ever to make the Zionist experiment succeed at any cost. This results in even more determined and fanatical Arab resistance.
The Arab world today is angry and even violent, like a tiger with a thorn in its paw. If the thorn Israel would remove itself, the tiger, relieved of its pain, would relax. The Mideast would return to relative peace. Arab international terrorism would have lost its primary reason to exist. If the thorn Israel would remove itself, there would be no need for an American war on terrorism. Government snooping and loss of individual rights and privacy in the name of homeland security would be unnecessary. There would be no need for America to make the Middle East safe for Israel. All these sacrifices lead back to the false premise that Christian civilization has a religious duty to preserve the political state of Israel at any cost. Someday, the Bible tells us, a remnant of Jews will return to God out of great tribulation. They will give him the obedience he demands. At Christ's second coming, he will lead this believing remnant back to the land of their forefathers. They will dwell there lawfully in peace. This will be the only biblically legitimate return the Jews will make to Palestine since their rejection of Christ nearly 2,000 years ago. Such a return will gloriously fulfill hundreds of Old Testament prophecies. Yet for the present, both Zionists and evangelicals continue to ram a counterfeit return down the throats of the Arab world. As a result, the Mideast continues to bleed. How did the world get into this dilemma? The Zionist Back to Israel movement gained momentum during World War I. Zionist leaders powerfully influenced America and Britain to help provide a Palestinian homeland for such hated Eastern European Jews. There was one problem. The Turks, ancient rivals of Western civilization, had ruled the majority of the Middle East for 400 years. They also opposed a Jewish homeland in Palestine. On the other hand, most Arabs under Turkish control yearned to overthrow Turkish oppression and find freedom. As a result, the Arabs favored the Western allies in World War I. The Arab world hoped that, should the Allies be victorious over Germany and the Turks, Britain could oversee the Middle East, giving liberty to all Arabs, including Palestinians.
For this reason, during World War I, the Arabs were trusted allies of the West, assisting British forces and their military leaders, such as Lawrence of Arabia, in fighting the Turks. When the Allies were victorious, the Arabs obtained freedom at last. Yet in Palestine it was different. The British, to the astonishment of the Arabs, announced through the Balfour Declaration that Palestine would be shared between its Arab inhabitants and European Jews. The Arabs felt betrayed. Britain had led them to expect an independent state for Palestinian Arabs.
On the other hand, the British government made it clear that in allowing Jews to purchase, lease, and thus control large amounts of Arab land in Palestine, special favor would not be given to the Jews. Jews were to be viewed on equal footing legally with the Arab population. The Zionists had a different point of view. They believed God's covenant granted all of Palestine to Jews alone. They saw the Arabs, even though they had lived in Palestine for 1,300 years, as squatters. The task before the Zionists, even from their earliest beginnings, was the removal of the Arabs. The Zionist settlers, being largely subsidized by foreign Jewish capital from Europe and the U.S., were in a position of great advantage over the poor and backward Palestinians.
Far from comprising a humble, repentant remnant, such as God allowed to occupy Palestine under Joshua and Ezra, most Jewish settlers who inhabited Palestine in the 20s and 30s were Marxist Jews from Russia and Eastern Europe. Their goal was to establish an ideal communist state in Palestine. With this in mind, collectives called kibbutzes were formed. Built on Marxist ideals, these were established on land obtained from the Arabs. Only Jews were allowed to farm and benefit from them. For the most part, no Arab labor was permitted, nor were Arab goods purchased. The result of this abrasive policy of economic separation was that as early as the 1920s, Palestine had become polarized. The Zionists, disregarding the territorial rights of the Arabs, did all they could to economically elbow the Palestinians out of the land of their ancestors. The Arabs, realizing the Zionists would settle for nothing less than total control of Palestine, became embittered. During 1936, Arab riots flared throughout Palestine. The British government also was displeased with Zionist dominance of the Arab population. The Balfour Declaration stipulated that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. The British knew the Zionists had made a mockery of this provision, trampling on its guarantee of Arab rights